Speaking with Confidence, the podcast dedicated to helping you unlock the power of effective public speaking. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on your journey to becoming a powerful communicator. I want to thank each and every one of you for your support. It truly means the world to me. If you have questions or if you want something covered in the podcast, just send me an email. Please visit timnewmanspeaks.com to get your free ebook, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. Our guest today is John Little. He's a nationally recognized executive performance coach, speaker, and leadership expert with over 25 years' experience helping leaders break through self-doubt and step into their full potential. He has coached hundreds of professionals into executive roles by tackling imposter syndrome head-on and building a personal leadership brand that commands influence. His approach is bold, insightful, and transformational. So get ready to take notes, reflect, and walk away empowered. John, welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, we have some things in common from our professional background in the sport industry, and it's not the glamorous jet-setting life that most people think it is.
Absolutely not. It's the grimy under parts of it that we've had that experience in.
Yeah, it's at least for me, it was fun while it lasted, and there's things I miss, but there's a reason why I'm not doing it anymore, and I like it much better on this side of the aisle than the grind that it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. I tell people all the time when I share my background of, working for 10 years in sports television, and people say, oh, that must've been amazing. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it was, it was like every night going to work at a sports bar with no alcohol, but we had all the games and had all the camaraderie that you would expect and all the rivalries and all the trash talking and all the fun. But that's just, waiting for the Blue Jays and Angels to finish a 13-inning game on the West Coast when you're in Atlanta in the middle of July. And that's just Wednesday. Like, it's going to happen again. At a certain point, you realize, I don't know if I want that the rest of my life.
Exactly. That's a piece that nobody sees. And it is what it is. And it's for, I really think that those types of things are for the younger generations. And as you get older and have families and kids and other responsibilities, those types of things, at least from my perspective, take away from the things that I think are important, like family and relationships and those types of things. But God bless them. We gotta have it. It's the driver.
Absolutely.
So it is what it is.
That's right. It's right.
But one of the things that that we talked about in the pre-show meeting, is about how the younger generation of people, grew up completely different than we did. From being outside and playing with friends unsupervised, to how we communicate with each other. We had landlines. Most people don't even know what that is. Like I told you, I had the dial, the rotary dial phones before we even had the not the I just called it electronic. The non-tethered kind. Yeah, the push buttons types of things. So. And you were lucky if you had call waiting, right? And now we have these smartphones that they go off constantly. You can patch 17 people into one phone call, all these other things, and I think that really kind of changed how generations have not only grown up, but how they've been raised and how they deal with issues such as adversity and resilience.
100%.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, it's whenever I talk about this, I'm always mindful to not be the old man shouting at the clouds.
Right.
And, the back in my day, but it definitely is different today than it was when we were growing up. I was caller ID. I would answer the phone and I would announce who it was that was on the phone. And if my parents wanted to speak to them, they did. And if not, then I was
they
a
weren't
call
home.
screener.
Yeah, they weren't home.
Exactly.
They're there.
Right. Dad, are you home? No. Okay. But those things that we experienced growing up and kind of the way that we experienced them growing up, they certainly did lay a different groundwork and foundation than people have today. Again, it's not right or not wrong. It's just different.
Right.
And, the things that we learned of, talking to people, talking to there was,
Mhm.
there was the don't talk to strangers, but there wasn't the stranger danger that exists today, right? I remember walking to school my entire and I grew up in a smaller town. I didn't grow up in a big city, but I remember walking to school every day, not thinking anything of it. My parents thought nothing of it. There was a lot more freedom and experiences that I was having as a kid that definitely set that foundation for kind of not an adventurous spirit so much, but just kind of a lack of fear and intimidation from the world that has kind of served me throughout my life of not being afraid to do things differently, not being afraid to take chances here and there, not being afraid to look at experiences. And if it doesn't work out, like, okay, what's next? Right. That you
Yeah.
talked about the adversity and the resilience. A lot of those lessons were learned early on in life, kind of growing through experiences that I had.
Yeah, and again, we kinda grew up right around the same time, and, talk about walking to school. I actually had this conversation last week, with somebody, uh, with taking the school bus. So, where I lived, if you lived within a mile of the school, you had to walk. That wasn't, and it didn't matter if it was raining, didn't matter if it was snowing. If you lived within a mile, you were walking it, and
That's right.
so we had snow days, but we don't have snow days like today. Like if there's a threat of snow, you know, everything shuts down. But you know,
Yeah,
you were going to school, and
that's right.
that's just what it is. And I think that's really kind of all those types of things that have affected how we manage stress, how we look at things from the bigger picture. Like you said, in terms of adventure and trying new things. And I kind of think that also kind of leads into why we have now. There's been the whole idea of imposter syndrome for forever, but I think
Oh yeah,
part of that is where we are today is because of some of those changes in how we're raising our kids.
I could completely agree with you. One of the big things with imposter syndrome that people experience, and it doesn't matter if it's someone who's new in their career, it doesn't matter if someone who's just getting started, doesn't matter if it's someone who is kind of moved up the ladder in their career. One of the big things is that feeling or that voice in the back of your head that's telling you you don't deserve to be here, you shouldn't be here. Um, and the reality is, if you're in those rooms, if you're in those spaces, you're there for a reason.
Reason,
You're
right?
there because you've either earned that space or you've been invited in. And so the mindset of like kind of knowing that you can go places that you haven't been before, the understanding that you can be a little bit of a pioneer, you can be
Right.
someone who does things that you haven't seen or experienced before, those things help to overcome imposter syndrome. And it's kind of a disconnecting thought process that you have to
Yes.
have. Whenever I experience this, and I know we'll unpack this further, whenever I experience imposter syndrome, and I do, I just like anybody else, there's
Right.
times where I have those questions, those doubts. I always remind myself, like, I'm here for a reason, and I can kind of go through my brag book of accomplishments, if you will, of okay, here is how I earned the
Right.
space to be here. Here's how I earned this opportunity to be in this space.
Yeah, and I think you really kinda nailed it. The whole idea of getting rid of that negative self-talk or whatever you wanna call it, imposter syndrome. I mean, we have all kinds of names for it, is, building and developing that confidence. And it's it's funny, I saw a video this morning. One of the first things I do, and maybe this is again me growing up, is when I wake up, I read news, quick headlines if I wanna read something more in depth, whatever. And then I go and I look at LinkedIn and just kinda get an idea of what's going on for the day. And there was a reel that actually talked about confidence and how a lot of times what we do, and the guy nailed it. A lot of times what we do is we think that confidence is the after effect. But what he said was confidence is is building confidence is the process. It's the
Yeah,
by doing the things we build confidence, which allows us to, you know, try something even further down the line and further down the line, further down the line. So understand that confidence isn't the end, it's part of the process.
absolutely. Hey, so here's what's funny, and I love that you said that because there's kind of three pockets that people will look at. They'll look at confidence, they'll look at a lack of confidence or they'll look at ego, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And a lack of confidence. What's really funny is that lack of confidence and ego are kind of the same things. They just
yes,
show up differently.
very differently, right?
Um, but like true confidence, when someone has true confidence, oh my God, that's just so inspiring.
Mhm.
Like you can just see that how cool that is for them. You can see how they just kind of own the space that they're in. They're
Yeah,
unapologetic about who they are. They can really lean into their authenticity. People who are really confident are great listeners because they
yes,
don't feel like they have to fill the space with whatever it is that they feel like they have to say in the moment. People with great confidence are often the ones who are also great leaders because people are just drawn to them. And,
yeah,
and so that again, from an imposter syndrome standpoint, is like, what are the things that help me feel confident? What are the things that build my confidence? What are the things that help me be and be authentic and then share that with the world? And I was doing a presentation for a group last week. Last Thursday I did it for them. And I shared a video from Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K, retired from Duke, U.S. men's basketball coach for a number of years. And he was talking about the Redeem team in 2008. And one of the things that he said before one of the meetings with the players was, I don't believe in check your ego at the door. Like bring your ego into the room, bring it with you. And there was like a little bit of pushback from the company because they were like really mindful of that word ego. So I helped them reframe it. I was like, in
right,
that context, that ego is their superpower, right?
right,
We're talking about Kobe. We're talking about LeBron James. We're talking about Dwayne Wade. We're talking about Jason Kidd. We're talking about some of the best to ever do it. Like they need to bring that superpower with them. But that ego is not, I'm better than you. That ego
right,
is, I have full confidence that I can do everything.
right.
So it's just kind of sometimes the words get a little bit mixed up, but I love that you brought confidence into the conversation.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. A lot of times ego has a negative connotation, and with the way that it's presented and the way that we act on ego, it does have that negative connotation. Like you said, if we just do a little shift in that mindset, which is a lot of what we do anyway, we're just really trying to help people, you know, shift their mindset. Understand that ego can be a very good and powerful thing to help us get through whatever it is that our challenges are.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at confidence again, um, also through the lens of humility, and
Yes.
like people will sometimes. It's funny when people say, "Oh, I'm the most humble person that you'll meet," right? Anytime someone brags on their humility, I got questions about that, right?
Yes.
Humility is something that that shines through. Like people see that in you. I am someone, and I'm going to sound ridiculous by saying this, but I consider myself to be humble because I don't like put a whole bunch of myself out there
Right.
in a way that's like in a braggadocious way. But I
Mhm.
do feel like for the things that I do for as a leadership coach, for someone who talks about leadership all the time, I feel like that's what I do really really well. But I
Right.
don't have to tell you that. I
Right.
would much rather show you that. But I feel confident that if you give me the opportunity, then you're
That
going to
comes
walk away wowed. But
yeah,
I'm not
it
going to
it
tell you,
comes
I'm
through.
going to wow you. I'm going to give you everything. I mean, that's that because then you set yourself up for either not for failure, but you set yourself up to look foolish sometimes when you
Exactly.
oversell through your ego.
Yeah. Yeah, and, there are a few things that if people say that they are, like, "I'm humble, I've got I've got integrity, I've got honesty." Okay, because, again, like you said, if I've gotta tell you those things, then those are things that just are just shine through and come through with people, and, um, it just kinda makes me laugh 'cause, for me, those are red flags. As soon as somebody says that, I'm taking a step back, and I'm thinking, "Okay,
Yep,
um, I'm having a different conversation in my head," and that sort of thing, so, uh,
absolutely.
those are just traits that should shine through. But what do you think the role of technology plays today in terms of imposter syndrome? Because again, remember, like I said, imposter syndrome has been around for forever. It's not something new. But what do you
Yeah.
think? What role do you think technology plays in that for our younger generations?
So many layers, so many layers. We can talk about what we see on social media, and what's real and what's not. when we see things on, so, just scrolling on Instagram.
Yeah.
You see so many things that if you measure yourself against your screen, you're always going to fall short
Mhm.
because you're measuring yourself against someone's intentional portrayal of what their experiences may or may not be. And I know that sounds like word salad, but it really is like, when you put something out there on social media, that's what you want the world to perceive is your truth.
Right.
Um, and if you're scrolling and if you're watching that, if you're measuring yourself against that, of course, there's going to be the doubts and the concerns of like, I'm not there, or, I don't have the same experience this person has. Like I haven't been to the places that they've been. I haven't done the things that they've done. I haven't seen the things that they've seen. The reality is so much of that is just, I'm going to use an old school word, fugazi.
Yeah.
It's all
I
fake,
love it.
As I don't want to say it's all fake, but a lot of it is just show. And
Right.
if people are measuring themselves against that, without having the reality checks to balance it out, then that can certainly feed into the imposter syndrome of I should have more, I should do more, I should be somewhere that I'm not. And then they get some of those self doubts, some of those concerns pop in. So that's one way that technology certainly has contributed to imposter syndrome. I think even though I really value AI and I see where it's super beneficial and I use it in my business a lot, I also recognize how AI can help. It could create some of those places of insecurities within people.
Yes.
If you see what somebody is producing or you see what somebody is sharing, or even if you're kind of, if you're measuring yourself against the machine of, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know all this information, not all these different, components of something that I'm trying to learn, that could be intimidating, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's so, it's so important, I think, for people to kind of be present in the moment, you know, kind of recognize and accept where you are as where
Right.
you are today, but where you are today is just the next step towards tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Right.
And, everything can be kind of a launching point, rather than kind of getting bogged down
Yeah.
in where you may be or where you think you should be. You know, start today and leap forward.
Yeah, and there's again with technology, there's so much information out there and so many different directions that people can go. Just because somebody on TikTok or Instagram is doing it this way doesn't mean that they know everything about everything.
Right.
And maybe you want to put a different slant on things, or maybe you want to go in a different direction. All, our life experiences lead us to where we are today, and that's what's going to help us go where we are tomorrow. And we all have different life experiences. It doesn't doesn't really matter. Um, and I think that's the other thing that really kind of gets lost in this. Just because how many leadership coaches are out there? There's a ton. I mean,
Yeah.
how many communication coaches out there? There's a ton. I mean,
Right.
how many basketball coaches are there? Right, I mean, they all
Exactly.
have they all a lot of them are really, really successful. They all have their own way. They all have their own way of communicating. They all have their own systems, and it's whatever
Hmm.
resonates with the people that they're leading. And so we
Yeah.
don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to have the same level of knowledge. We don't all have to have the same level of whatever it is. You be you, get better at being you, and you're gonna be just fine.
Tim, I love you said that because it reminds me of one of the things that I learned a few years ago that was just a game changer for me. Because yeah, I mean, you can't throw a stone on LinkedIn without hitting a coach,
Right.
right? Whether they're a leadership coach, executive coach, communications coach, career coach, a LinkedIn coach. I mean, good Lord, you simply you can't do it. But what I learned a few years ago is the power of understanding your unfair advantage. And everybody has an unfair advantage. And that
Yes.
unfair advantage is you are the only you. Like your experiences, your perspectives, your knowledge, your your thoughts, like all of those things are uniquely yours.
Right.
So by not being afraid to be an individual in a crowded space, by not being afraid to speak and share the things that make you unique, that those things are your unfair advantage, right? In our pre-show meeting, we talked about a little bit about our backgrounds, and I shared with you that I had, what I call a career jungle gym,
Yeah.
because where I am today, if you told 21-year-old me as I was graduating from college that this is where I would be at the right young age of 54, I'd be like, that makes no sense ever. I have no interest in being in corporate
Right.
America. I have no interest in, you know, working with HR folks. Like, if you had told 21-year-old me that, I would have said you're crazy.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
all of the experiences that I've had throughout my career in my life make me the exact perfect person to be where I am today, in those spaces, talking to those people, sharing my experiences and perspectives.
Yeah. And hopefully young people can understand that they're in a they're in a much better place from that perspective, because when we were growing up, you better not be an individual. You better just fall in line. Everybody's gonna do it this way. Everybody's gonna do it this way.
Yep.
And now we're in a time period which is, I think, a whole lot better for us as a society to let and allow people and embrace people and encourage people to be individuals and to find ways to do things themselves. And it's okay to embrace it and really kind of lean into it.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, when we were growing up, again, back, in the same time frame that many of your listeners are in from an age standpoint, individuality was really frowned upon,
Was.
right? It was like, if you were an individual, you were an outcast.
Mhm.
It's not like it is today, where when you're an individual, you have things that can be celebrated. And the other thing that happened when there were individuals that were outcasts was there was no community for them.
Right.
There was no place for them to go. Today, there's so many communities that you could find. So whatever your interests are, whatever it is that lights you up, whatever it is that you want to pursue, there's a community for that, and
Mhm.
you can find it and you can connect with it. Because, like, I had my first cell phone, I think, at maybe 25 or 26, right?
Okay.
Um, my first, even though because of where I grew up in upstate New York, we would take family trips to Montreal and to Niagara Falls. So, like, I had been out of the country before, but I had no exposure to the actual world. I had
World,
never
right.
spoken to anybody in a different country until I was into my 30s,
Yeah.
because the world was different. The world is accessible now, which is so amazing for people who are trying to find how to connect with things that are important to them. And those things help to build confidence too, because when you feel like you're all alone on an island, it's hard to get confidence.
It
But when
is.
you have that community, when you have people that affirm you, you have people that say, yeah, I agree. I see the same things. I've experienced the world in a similar way. Good Lord, that just brings the walls down so much and allows people to be confident.
It really does. And, it's such a simple concept for us because, again, we've lived it. We've done those things, and we we've been over here, and now we see how much things are different, and it's easy for us to understand, but trying to get the younger generation to take that next step, um, it's to me, that's what I find really difficult. And, I tell people a lot that today's younger generations, I think, are so much smarter than we were at that age. They're so
Absolutely.
much more entrepreneurial than we were at that age,
Yep.
but their communication skills are so much worse than ours were, and that's the thing that's really holding them back.
I agree. I mean, the access to information is so much greater now
Mhm.
than it's ever been. As I was just saying, the access to the world is so much better now than it's ever
Yeah.
been. The downside of communication and the communication devices that we have and the ways to communicate is there are so many ways to communicate that don't require you to actually speak and talk to people.
Right.
Um, you can have an entire relationship with somebody over text. Um, I have my best friends who we've been friends for 30 plus years. We have a group chat. We talk multiple times in the group chat a day. I just spoke to one of my best friends in the world on the phone the other day for the first time in probably a year and a half. Um, because we're in constant conversation or communication, but we
Communication.
just haven't had conversations, right?
Right.
That's the gap that
Yes.
exists and that's where those muscles get built and you
Mhm.
learn how to communicate is when you're actually talking to people,
Yes.
or when you're actually, speaking publicly or on a podcast or whatever.
Right.
That's where you really build those muscles up.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just take that one step further. We talked about how I'm a recovering college professor, and last semester was my last semester, and so
Mhm.
what I realized so about a month or so ago, what I missed was the personal interaction. I missed being around people. I
Yeah,
missed the day-to-day of seeing people, shaking their hand, having that face-to-face conversation. You know, these types of things in the podcast is great, and I love it. I haven't been this professionally fulfilled in a long time, but I miss that interpersonal interaction, and it's just like you said, it's that muscle that if you don't use it, you lose or you become static in those skills where everybody else is getting better at it, and it is something that, again, from the young professional's perspective, what they have to understand is the only way to get better at these types of things is to go out and start doing them.
absolutely. Humans by design are social animals.
Yeah,
Um, so there's something within us, whether we're extroverted, whether we have introversion preferences, it doesn't matter. We
doesn't matter,
still
right?
have that social engine within us that needs to be fulfilled. And if
Right.
it doesn't, that just makes life harder.
It does, it does. And most of your work is in the executive leadership space, and so I would say all of leadership really revolves around communication. Um, and
Yeah.
I did a presentation a couple weeks ago where I threw out a stat that you know 92% of talent and HR professionals value soft skills just as much or more than hard skills. And we're not really teaching the soft skills anywhere
Hmm.
in our education system, in our as they're growing up. So how do we get people because we need leaders from all walks of life in every business, every industry, every little a- aspect of life. We need people who are leaders. How do we get people um, with very little to no good communication skills to be able to grow that to actually turn into an effective leader?
It's flipping it on its head a little bit. It's recognizing that the soft skills are now hard skills. Um,
Oh,
I can learn
wow. Okay.
I can learn many hard skills now,
Hmm.
either through YouTube or through e-learning, digital learning. Like, I can learn the hard
Right.
skills and I can rep the hard skills. The soft skills are the harder ones to teach now
Yeah.
because we don't have the environments that support those as we once did.
Hmm.
Prior to COVID, most people went to the office 5 days a week,
Right.
40 hours a week. That community that you have at work, like that was a way that people were able to exercise those muscles. Um, Now that we're in a work from home hybrid, some back to work situations, like it's different. It's challenging. So how do we, to your question, how do we now build those things up? One, it takes individual ownership. It takes that want to of recognizing if I want to grow in my career, if I want to be a leader, I do have to practice these skills. I do have to practice communication skills. Part of it starts, and this is things that I've worked with leaders is don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask. So if there's a project that you want to be on, if there's a team that you want to learn more about, if there's a meeting that you want to be in, if you want to grow, like people aren't going to know that until you open up your mouth and you share it.
Yeah.
So, like building up the confidence to ask, "Hey, I want to learn more about this. Can I come to this meeting? I have questions. I was on this call. I have questions. Can I take you to lunch for 50? Can I take you to lunch? Can I get 15 minutes? Can we go walk and get a coffee? Can we hop on a Zoom? Any way that you can create opportunities to have the one-on-one conversations,
Right.
that's the way to build that muscle. And by doing that, you're going to stand out because there aren't people that are doing that now. There's a lot of people who are waiting for opportunities to come to them. But the more proactive you are about creating those opportunities for those conversations, that's where things that's where the muscle gets built. That's also where trust gets built
Yes.
with people who you're trying to, get to get on the radar, raise your profile with whomever. And that's where confidence grows,
Right.
because the more that you start to see that that works, the more confident you are in doing it.
Yeah. Again, really, really good points. And I wish young people could understand the power of being curious, the power of asking questions, the power of going to somebody and say, can I get 15 minutes? Let's go get coffee, like a coffee you said. Let's, you know, you because I want to learn more. That automatically elevates them from their peers. That
Right.
in and of itself, you're gonna learn something, especially if you're coming from it from a place of being curious and you're bringing value. You're not asking surface level questions. You're asking, thoughtful questions, and you're showing that you truly want to learn and get better. And then if you do a good follow-up piece after that, I mean, how much that actually elevates you and separates you from your peers. I wish they You know, I wish they would just listen to us and do those types of things. It would be so much better for them. But, those things are so powerful.
Yeah, a personal thank you
Yeah,
goes, it's so simple, but it goes just so far, especially today when those things just don't quite get done as frequently. I can't tell you the last time I've gotten a handwritten note, but whenever I get one, it's like I appreciate. It really matter what the note says. I appreciate that someone took the time to
right.
actually sit down and write something. Right, those are the things that make a difference.
Yeah,
Also, not being afraid to say that you don't know what you don't know. Um, when it comes to imposter syndrome, that's one of the things that people will get hung up on. Is if I say I don't know what this means, then what's that going to say? What are people going to think? What message does that send? But the reality is, if you don't know, then the best way to find out is to ask. One reason why I was terrible at sales was like fake it till you make it just doesn't
doesn't
work
get it
for
to me.
me.
Doesn't work for me
Like,
either.
I can't, I can't fake it, because that's not authentic to who I am.
Right,
Like, if I don't know, I'm not gonna try to act like that I do. I'm
right.
going to find out. I'm gonna ask questions. I'm gonna try to learn. Um, and people here's the other thing that people don't know. Most people want you to succeed.
Yes, they do.
Most people want you to succeed, and they'll help to support your success. So asking questions to help to be successful, those are things that people will want to hear from you. They don't
Mhm.
want you to try to figure it out on your own all the time or flop or flail. They're not going to sabotage you if you say, "Hey, can you explain what this means to me?" Like, people want you to succeed
They do.
because success makes everybody's life easier and better.
Yes, yes. I get I think that's something would probably be one of my top things to get across to people. Um, let's put it this way, I don't know anybody that would hire somebody in hopes that they fail. It
Right.
doesn't make any sense, right? Um,
Right.
I don't know of any professional that hopes other people fail. I just don't, and if you do know those people, then those aren't the people that you wanna be around anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I don't know any of those people, but, you know, that also I think comes back to that whole inner dialogue that we have sometimes, and just get over that. People wanna help. That's just it. That nobody wants you to fail. It just doesn't make any sense, when you
Right.
think about it from a logical, perspective.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive for people to put you in a position that you're not gonna succeed in. Um, and when I talk with leaders, and this is one of the things that I help them shift their mindset from being either a micromanager or someone who is so focused on the tactical transactional pieces that they are actually leading. The better that you are at teaching and delegating, the better your job and the easier your job becomes, because then you aren't working and interning at the same company at the same time.
Right.
And a lot of leaders will do that, is they'll be so invested in the actual work of things that they're not strategizing and they're not being visionary and that's where we need leaders to be. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need a leader to handhold me through the work once they've showed me how to do it. What I need a leader to do is put me in a position to succeed,
See.
support my success, and help us move to the next level.
Right.
So it's I was listening to a podcast yesterday, the John Maxwell podcast,
Oh, he's
and that
good.
was one of the things
Yeah.
that he was talking about, is that, leaders shouldn't be delegating work and tasks. They should be delegating authority,
Right.
which is, don't let me like sit here and do the work with you or tell you the step by step of what I want you to do. I want to tell you the outcome. I want to tell you the desired result. I want you to figure out your path. And when you get stuck, that's where I'm going to step in and help
Right.
you.
That again, really good points. John Max was, I don't have to say it, but I mean, he's phenomenal. I love what he says and what he does. How
Yeah.
much do you think that what you just talked about comes from a lack of training? Because, as I look at it, when people get promoted, they get, number one, they get promoted because they're good at what they do, right? They're good
Yep.
at the task that they're doing, or tasks that they're doing. They get promoted into management and don't have management skills, and they get caught into that trap that you just talked about, and then they get promoted because, again, there's a difference between management and leadership, and then they get promoted into leadership, and they've never really developed the management skills. So now, as the leader, like, they're back to doing exactly what you just said.
It happens far more frequently than the opposite.
Yeah.
Most organizations don't have a robust leadership development strategy. And what leadership development strategies look like is, I'm going to work on the leaders being more transformational minded, being
Right.
more strategic, being more visionary, being more focused on the people than the work itself. Because when you're an individual contributor, or maybe even when you're a frontline manager, like, that's your thing. It's like, you are doing the work,
Right.
and that's where you shine, and that's where you will potentially get promoted. But then when you get promoted, a lot of times there's not that training that helps people take that next step,
Right.
and shift. That's why people get stuck in either middle management roles, or we hear so much, feedback and noise in the
Right.
world about bad leaders and organizations that
Yeah.
struggle because they don't have good leaders. Leaders who aren't accountable, leaders who don't listen, leaders that they don't trust. We hear so much of that. And it's always weird. It's like, so they got to that position because they were terrible? No, they
No.
got to that position because they were really good at something. But
Right.
that something isn't what they're needing to be doing right now. But
Right.
they haven't gotten the levels of support and development to succeed in that role the way that they should.
Right. I almost think that training and development should happen before they're promoted, right?
Absolutely.
As you know, so, when you're in your frontline position, there's a management leadership track. If this is what you want to do, these are the classes. This is the training that we offer. We'll send you to the school, whatever it is. And I think, it's so much more cost effective to do that than to have to hire somebody, or have to clean up messes, or spend a bunch of time and energy later, to do it on the front end. That makes it's providing benefit to the employee, which is on the back end is gonna help the organization.
Yep.
It shows that the employee that you care about them and their development, which is gonna make them, buy more into the process and into the organization. It's a much better way of progressing, I think. Um, it's good for me to say that out here where I'm not in those spaces, but, it's to me, it's much more cost effective and beneficial doing it that way than the way we're currently than the current model, let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, and kind of putting it into financial terms,
Mhm.
let's say that you have a $25,000 pool of money. Do you want to invest that $25,000 in the future of your organization by doing some leadership training, doing some management training, doing some coaching? Or do you want to spend that money on an outside recruiter and advertising for job openings and things like that because people keep leaving your organization,
Right.
right? It's the same pool of money. It's
Right.
just, do you want to invest it or do you want to spend it?
Spend it. Yep.
You know, investment, you're going to get a return.
Yeah.
If you spend it, you might not.
Right. Yeah. I read a stat recently that it costs, like five to $7,000 to hire a new employee. Um,
Right.
and if, depending on the size of your company, at $7,000 is one for one person, it's a lot of money. And if you're a bigger organization, bigger corporation, and you're doing that, if you're hiring somebody every week, which we know some organizations are, I mean,
Hmm.
how much money are you wasting? Are you losing there? I
That adds up.
it
And
really does.
at higher levels in the organization, if it's leaders that you're replacing, the higher up in the organization someone is, the higher the cost is. There's
Right.
another stat
Mhm.
that it can take up to 1.3 over the span of a year, 1.3 times the salary of somebody who leaves
Well,
to replace them, hire them, train that person, and set them up to meet the level of where the person was when they left. So it's not so that 1.3 times investment isn't that you're getting someone who's at that 1.3 level of advancement. Like you're spending that much just to get back to where you were on the
right.
day that person left.
Left.
And that's just money, and think about time and everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes so much more sense to invest. And for individuals, like if you have the aspirations to grow, like invest in yourself now. And it doesn't have to be money. Like listen to podcasts about leadership.
Yeah.
Follow the right people on YouTube and LinkedIn. You're not saying who those right people are because it's different for everybody.
Everybody. Right.
But like find your thought leaders that resonate with you, and then start to implement the things that
Yeah.
you learn in whatever role that you're in today.
Exactly. And I just want to make this point too. You don't have to go get an MBA either, because I mean uh, that seems to be, with a lot of young people. Well, I'm just going to go get an MBA. Okay, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Again, I'm not saying one way or the other, but a lot of times that's not the answer. Because you don't need to spend all that money, on yourself. Maybe a corporation or organization will do it for you if you're in the right position, or maybe you don't even need those skills right now, and that's something that can be added later. There's so many more opportunities out there for learning and development and training than spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to get an MBA. So, and
Yeah.
that's coming from a
I
college professor, and I mean, I'm just open and honest about it. A
yeah.
lot of times we spend money on college degrees, which we have no need to be getting a college degree.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of educators. My
Yeah.
mom taught elementary school for 35 years. My dad was an assistant principal and a principal for about the same amount of time. So, and both of them have graduate degrees. My sister had a graduate degree. I have a bachelor's. I've I've never had anybody ask me about my credentials.
Right.
They see the work that I do. They
Yeah.
hear the things that I share. They see the value in those things. That's what matters.
That's what matters.
Like I
Yeah.
mean, I'm like you. I'm not gonna say one way or the other, right or wrong, do or don't. Most of the time, people don't care about alphabet soup.
They don't. I
They care about results. How
Right.
how can you help me?
Exactly. Exactly. And one more thing, you can't really help them if you're worried about, paying back thousands of dollars student loans, because that's where your mind is, and you're more worried about I'm not saying that money isn't important, but you're worried about the the money, and not some other things that are important. But again, I'll leave that there. What what are some in terms of leadership and communication, you know, because again, we think that leaders, or there's a perception out there that leaders have it all under control. But what are some of the internal barriers that they have in terms of communication?
Yeah. The number one thing that I find with leaders as a barrier is they don't understand how to build trust.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Trust is the foundational thing that leaders need to build. Understanding how you build trust with people, how you learn to trust people what's important for you when you're connecting with someone in order for you to start to trust them, and also understanding what they need from you in order for them to start trusting you. If you don't solve that trust equation, it makes everything much harder.
It does.
And from a communication standpoint, once you have trust, then you can communicate at a much deeper level because it removes the barriers and the fear of if I say something, it's going to be taken a different way. Right. So if I trust you, Tim, and we have spent the time to build trust and rapport, like I can tell you something and I can tell it to you in a way that I expect that it's going to land with you. And
Right.
even if it lands a little bit differently, or if it lands off of what I thought it might, if we have a trusting relationship, then you're gonna recognize that my intent was good,
Right.
maybe my delivery was bad,
Right.
right? If we don't have trust, and if we haven't spent any time building trust, I'm gonna hear everything through my lens and interpret it through how I feel you are saying something because I don't know any better.
Right.
Right, and that can be good, that can be bad, like, someone could you could get a compliment from someone, and you may think that it's the best thing in the world, and they may just have been saying something kinda off the cuff, like, if you don't really understand where it's coming from,
Right.
then it's really hard to truly understand someone, makes it much harder to communicate, so building trust is the foundational piece for leaders when it comes to communication.
Yeah. Trust is it's so hard to build, but so easy to lose. Um, and I it's something that I think people really need to think about as they go through, make decisions, communicate with people, how they interact and how they make those decisions, is really important, which to me is also something that builds trust. I mean, if you make decisions behind closed doors and don't give any type of context, especially some hard decisions, trust is gone. I mean, it's just gone. Now,
Right,
again, it doesn't mean you have to go the other way. You don't have to give everybody all the information either, but there needs to be some open, honest communication, some transparency, some um, sitting down and both sides being willing to have have the hard conversations and understand it's business, it's not personal,
right.
and be able to approach from that perspective. So, um, trust. You're right. Trust is really paramount.
Yeah, you mentioned the word transparency. Super important. Vulnerability, equally as important. Just a quick cheat sheet for you and your listeners on trust. Like people will build trust generally two ways. They'll either build trust through wanting to, build a relationship with someone, and then that's how I'm going to learn about trusting them. Do I want to learn more about this person? Do I want to invest in that relationship, or do I need to see evidence of work over time? Do I need to see evidence of credibility over time before I'll start to trust someone? So that's the first question that people need to ask themselves is like, when I meet someone, what am I looking for from that person? Am I looking for a personal connection, or am I looking to kind of evaluate them and see, do they bring value? Do they bring credibility? Neither one of them is right or wrong. It's
Right.
just a process that we use to build trust. When you can start to understand that about yourself, then you can start to build trust with people quicker because you know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
And then you can start to ask those questions of people too
Right.
when it comes to, kind of feeding or feeling out where their trust levers are and the things that they use to build trust. So like using that cheat sheet, using that process can really streamline building trust with people quickly.
Yeah. It's so true. But again, you said it. You got to know who you are first,
Right.
and how you build that trust, or what's important to you in building trust, and what your process is, uh, which is we could go down that rabbit hole and talk for hours on that too. So, uh,
Absolutely.
but John, this has been really good stuff. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so people can go to my website, www.thewinnersedgecoaching.com. The place that I'm really probably the most present and active is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So linkedin.com/in/slash Big John Little is where people can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I typically will spend, that's my kind of my social platform
Yeah.
of choice. And that's where I engage with most folks on there.
And John, I'll tell you, and I'll tell the listeners too. You you got to follow John. He puts out some really good information.
I
It's
appreciate that.
timely, it's actionable, it's on point. I'm not saying others on LinkedIn don't do that, but John, you do a really good job of that. And um, so
I
hopefully
appreciate that.
listeners will start following you there. Uh, but again,
Thank you.
John, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I love what you're saying. I think that our audience is going to get a lot of good actionable advice out of this, and some things to think about. Whether it's getting rid of that voice in our head, being confident enough to take that next step, just to start doing the thing, whatever it is, and just lean into who you are.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I really appreciate this opportunity. Talking about leadership and talking about confidence and all. I mean, these things are my professional love language. So
Yeah.
anytime I get a chance to share it, I'm really grateful. So thank you for this opportunity.
All right, my friend, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. You too.
Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free ebook, Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Formula for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.